A flurry of new updates are heading to our iOS devices, but there are some big concerns about what Apple have shown. In today's episode of Design Ahead, we're going to be taking a look at some of the big features shown in WWDC 25 and why they're going to change the way that you experience Apple products forever. So welcome back to Design Ahead with me, Jake Fernandes, and today we are going to be looking at and discussing what has been shown in the Worldwide Developer Conference 2025. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what WWDC is, it's essentially just a way for Apple to get their big software developers who are usually working on operating system releases to demonstrate some of the new things that are going to be coming in those future operating releases. For example, we've taken a huge jump from iOS 18 to iOS 26, which is going to be the new operating system for iPhones going forward from September 2025. I guess that's just a way for them to stop using this incremental thing that doesn't quite match up with the year, and then it makes it a lot easier because 2026 is iOS 26. But yes, it's essentially just a way for them to work across all of their products. So namely, we've got the iOS for iPhone, we've got iPadOS, we've got watchOS, tvOS, of course, visionOS for the new Apple Vision Pro, and of course, good old macOS. One thing to mention quickly here is that this is going to be the final macOS for Intel-based Macs. So if your MacBook is from before 2020, you're going to have an Intel Mac, so there is going to be no future releases past this one that will be supported on your device. So whether you're quite happy with that, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be, or if you feel like this is the time to upgrade to one of the silicon chips, that is a pretty big deciding factor, especially as we progress through these releases over the next few years. While we're on the topic of macOS, let's start by looking at what they've promised for the new macOS, which is going to be named Tahoe. So there's nothing groundbreaking happening necessarily here. I think a lot of these things that are starting to pave the way for the future are related to the Apple Intelligence, which is essentially the AI baked within the Apple products. What I do really like is this transparent bar that is going to be replacing the menu bar at the top of your screens. For me, this is an update that's been a long time coming. I think if you look at, iPhones, for example, we've had that transparent bar for quite some time now, and it does just free up that little bit of extra space. It stops that visual separation and just kind of makes the full UI feel a bit more fluid and unified. Another big feature I really like is the iPhone mirroring, so you don't need to open your iPhone if you've got activities going on in there. For example, let's say I'm at home and I've ordered Uber Eats or Deliveroo. What I hate right now is maybe I'll have my phone across the room and want to track an update on an order. I can't do that unless I go get my phone. I know, peak laziness, but now I'm able to open up my iPhone, mirror it in my MacBook, and be able to monitor that, make decisions, whatever it needs to be. I can interact with the app through my MacBook, which is fantastic. I can see a lot of brilliant things coming from this. As somebody who also uses my iPad as essentially a third screen, I use the Magic Keyboard and Mouse just to kind of move across. It's really, really helpful to be able to use other Apple products and have this kind of cohesive experience and not feel like you need to move away from your laptop to interact with your phone or with your iPad. So I'm really excited to see how this will develop and how people will start to use this in the future. The Spotlight improvements also look really good, again tying into some of the Apple Intelligence behind it. Personally, I'm not a big user of Spotlight. Maybe if I'm searching for a certain application, I might use it, but the other interactions that you can do, the ways in which you can use your MacBook through Spotlight is something I haven't really explored. But with this progression of Apple Intelligence and these things that they're already showing from WWDC, I'm really interested in seeing how this is going to be used going forward. So very excited for this new macOS update, very excited to start using Spotlight properly and see how it can improve my workflow. So let's get on to probably one of the biggest topics from WWDC, which is the new iOS 26 coming to iPhone. So a couple of the key features, there are some big camera changes. I think the headline here is that they are hiding a lot of options that are currently seen as maybe ways in which you can master photography. For example, having the ability to change the aperture or light gradients, whatever that might be. Again, apologies if I'm not getting these terms correctly. I'm clearly not a pro photographer anywhere near that. But I guess this is an interesting one because for me personally, I don't really use these features unless I'm really going to try and experiment in photography. Maybe I've heard a few tips or ways of which I could capture a cool photo, but on the fly, when I'm using my iPhone to capture things, it's capturing in the moment, whether that be photos with friends, gigs, whatever that is. I'm just kind of pulling that up to record a quick video or take a quick photo. And my general guess is that they would have done some research, obviously, and probably one of the most common things that they were getting feedback on is that people might be opening the camera app and then accidentally entering a new feature and then screwing up their camera, but who knows? And that's what it kind of indicates towards. And I think generally this is a positive thing. You know, we still got all of the features there. They're now more hidden, but people who are going to be using those features will be able to seek them out. And I think overall it does improve the user experience. It gets rid of the clutter for people who aren't going to be using it. The phone app as well, some really cool improvements. I like the fact that they've gelled together a few different features like recently called, favorites, and it feels a bit more of a social app, which again, that's what using your phone is for, what calling people directly is for, FaceTiming. It's a social activity. So these enlarged icons and tablet sort of squares that they've got, which preview people's faces or emojis. It's really cool. I really like it. I feel like the phone app can sometimes feel very rigid. It can feel very professional almost. And it lacks that kind of energy and that fun that you should have when you're calling friends or whoever it might be. On the topic of this, iMessage has received some updates. I genuinely don't think there's anything groundbreaking here. I think a lot of the things that they are doing is just catching up with other platforms like Messenger and WhatsApp, where you have these abilities to add polls, backgrounds, a little typing icon to see when people are replying. It's just stuff that is bringing it to the modern day. It's catching up with these other applications rather than providing something groundbreaking. Live translation as well, I feel like is a big thing. It's quite a popular topic across the entire industry at the moment. It's a whole new step from being able to detect what word you're saying, sort of voice to text, and now is adding that other layer of translation in real time and allowing it to be embedded within these conversations that you might have over the phone and it not feel out of place. It's a huge thing. I'm very excited to see more apps that involve communication with other people introduce this. For example, the live Google Translate is kind of getting there, although it's still not quite real time. I think it's still a bit jarring if you're using that in person. There's still a bit of a delay in between responses, but hopefully the more that this progresses, the lower the response time is, and the more natural that these things will start to feel if you're talking to somebody from a different country, you don't speak their language. And of course, we'll see the adaptations and inclusion of new languages across the board. And now we get onto liquid glass, which is probably been the most divisive thing that Apple have announced in quite a while. So liquid glass is this new kind of UI overhaul that they're introducing. There are a lot of options that are toggleable. There are some that are embedded within the new operating system. And for me, there are two huge issues which really need to be addressed before they start launching and rolling this out. So if you think about the audience of the iPhone, it's billions. It's everybody around the world of all ages, of all cultural backgrounds, of all abilities. You can't really boil down Apple's audience into a single or even a few categories. You have to cater for everybody. So for example, to put this into context, if you're looking at maybe music production software like FL Studio, Ableton, Logic, there's going to be a very core audience there of music producers. There will also be people who want to kind of mess around, try things out, who aren't professionals or aren't necessarily music producers. But for the most part, their core audience is going to be people who are very technical, who understand music, who understand how things work in sort of production chains, which means that they can have these very complex UIs with very little labeling, a lot going on, dials, buttons everywhere, because their core audience is going to get it. And if they don't, it's not too far-fetched for them to decipher what it is or figure it out. So that's why companies like Ableton can create products that will be very tailored towards a certain audience. There's always going to be accessibility needs that must be addressed. There are legal requirements throughout the world. If we look at WCAG 2.2 as well, there are many things listed out there that people need to be hitting, especially if we're creating like websites, for example. Visual impairments, mobility issues, dexterity, whatever it might be, there needs to be the ability to include toggle options or ways for the user to improve the interface to match their needs, or it needs to allow for usability tools to be used on the product. But that doesn't take away from the fact that your standard out-of-the-box product needs to be accessible and inclusive to as many people as you can possibly get. And if we look at liquid glass, it just isn't accessible, it isn't readable, it's very difficult to even decipher what some of these things are saying. It really depends on the background that you have and the choice that you make there. Yes, there's light and dark modes, but overall, I think regardless of what is being shown on screen, it's just very hard to understand the UI. And this is going to be problematic for a lot of people. It's going to create a lot of confusion. I really worry for this being rolled out as the kind of norm and it not being stress tested around so many different edges. I guess another point is it just looks very, very dull. And I love minimalism. I'm a big fan of like sleek creative branding, minimalist logos. It goes hand in hand with my ethos around simplicity, but the big issue that I have here is that it just isn't going to be used by probably anybody. You know, I really struggle to see a significant audience that are going to enable some of these features and think, you know what, this looks great. Let's just strip away all the color. Let's strip away everything and have it really clean, sleek and laid back. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is optional, the ability to just kind of whitewash everything and take away all color from the UI, but it just feels lifeless. And when you're looking at minimalism or minimalist UIs, you need to kind of capture that perfect balance of being stripped back, being completely not in your face, but also having very strong visual aspects that will keep the user engaged, keep them focused, and keep them excited about what you're showing them. And of course, making it very usable. I guess the one redeeming thing I can think of is that it's very easy on the eye. If you're somebody that struggles with eye strain or, you know, looking at very cluttered, colourful interfaces, this might be an option for you. I think it will be something that many people might use in that case. But generally speaking, you know, if that's not something that you're looking at in a user interface, I very, very much doubt you're ever going to toggle this on. They also showed some things around the watchOS, the Apple Watch, and I think these are just kind of more quality of life updates, which are quite nice, but there's nothing groundbreaking in here. This kind of wrist flicking, which kind of looks cool, I guess, if you get notifications and you just want to flick it away. There's been times where I'm kind of out on a run and I'm looking at my Strava, something pops up and just takes over the screen. I just don't want to flick it off with my finger. I just prefer to do that, and there you go. So that's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to that. And the automatic changing of volume for notifications, because sometimes it can just ding in your ears and you're like, whoa. So that's also quite nice. I like this adaptive understanding of the environment that you're in. I guess the other big thing to mention is around the iPad OS 26. And as somebody that uses iPads in a more work capacity, I use it as a third monitor. I think I just mentioned before when I was talking about using different devices as part of one ecosystem coherently. Yeah, I use the mouse and keyboard, so I can essentially just use it as a second screen. It's, you know, still powered. I could technically mirror or extend it from my MacBook, but I prefer to have it running by itself, so I'll have its own Notion documents or calendar or whatever, and I can just bring that up on there. The windowing system is huge for people like me because, again, it's almost like you're operating an iPhone at the minute. You can only have one thing on your screen. There may be like tips or tricks you can do to kind of size things off. I think there actually might be, but it just feels very clunky if I've used it. I'm kind of thinking back now, and I do remember using some things where I can sort of split off the screen in half. So having this windowed feature, a lot like the MacBook and the Mac OS, is going to be massive because then I can have multiple things on there. I already use a mouse and keyboard to operate on my iPad when I'm working, so I can very easily just kind of move things around, close things down, open other things up. I can shift between my Notion documents to my calendar to whatever else I might have open. So this is a game changer. It really unlocks the power that the iPads have. I think it's being slept on quite a lot through Apple. And overall, I'm just very excited to see what the future holds for the iPad OS. So let's see how things play out. As I believe, I think it's going to be around September that these products are going to be rolled out. I would assume that they will gauge the reaction from people online and what's been shown. They'll obviously be doing some user research and user testing going forward just to kind of stress test some of these things. But overall, I think these are great updates. I quite like, for the most part, how Apple try not to redefine the wheel. I guess the liquid glass is the closest thing to that. It's very risky. I don't think it's there yet, and I really hope that they're able to iterate on this and produce something that is going to be very useful while also being accessible, readable, user-friendly in general, I guess. But thank you so much for watching this episode of Design Ahead. Make sure you check out our socials at WeDesignAhead and the website designahead.co.uk if you're interested in our free HCD Foundations playbook. We also have a simplicity framework coming out very, very soon, so I'm excited to be sharing that that with you. So make sure you follow me on LinkedIn as well, just to keep with updates around that. But thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment with what you're most excited about from this WWDC 25, and I will catch you guys in the next one.